What if reality contains hidden seams? Moments when time stutters, chance collapses into pattern, and the universe reveals its architecture. These are not miracles or coincidences. They are glitches in the ordinary. 30 of them. And together, they invite a single question. Are we living in a cosmos far stranger than we dare to believe? The Mirror Lives. In 1940, two identical twin boys were separated at birth and adopted by different working-class families in Ohio. They would not meet again for 39 years. Yet when Jim Lewis and Jim Springer finally reunited, researchers discovered something that quietly shattered assumptions about identity and free will. Both had been named James by their adoptive parents, strangers who made the same choice independently. Both married women named Linda, then divorced them to marry women named Betty. Both named their firstborn sons James Allen. Both owned dogs named Toy. Both suffered migraines at the same age. Both built white benches around trees in their backyards. Genetics cannot explain why two strangers would independently choose identical names for spouses, children, and pets. This wasn't mere resemblance, it was a life lived twice in parallel, without contact or influence. The twins became living evidence that our choices may be less free than we believe. Perhaps identity isn't solely forged by experience, but partially remembered, as if consciousness follows predetermined contours, like water flowing through identical channels carved deep beneath reality's surface. The Jim twins invite a quiet, unsettling question. How much of your life have you truly chosen? Or are we all walking paths laid down before our first breath, echoing lives we've never lived, drawn toward people and places by invisible threads? In their mirrored existence, we glimpse a universe far stranger than randomness, one where souls might follow blueprints written in a language we cannot yet read. Not a glitch in the system, but perhaps the system itself. The name that defied death. For nearly 3 centuries, the Irish Sea held a secret written not in water, but in a name. In 1660, a wooden passenger ship shattered against Welsh rocks in December's freezing waters. 80 souls vanished beneath the whitecaps. Only one man survived, clinging to a beam, gasping for air. His name was Hugh Williams. The miracle should have ended there. But the ocean seemed to have encoded a pattern. In 1767, another shipwreck on the same coast claimed 127 lives. One survivor washed ashore, a man named Hugh Williams. In 1820, a capsized vessel drowned every passenger except one, again, Hugh Williams. The final act came in 1940. A German mine vaporized a trawler. Only 2 men survived, an uncle and nephew, both named Hugh Williams. This wasn't probability. It was repetition with impossible precision. Survival had nothing to do with swimming ability, physical strength, or even luck. It appeared tied to a single variable, bearing the right name at the wrong moment. The Hugh Williams legend suggests something unsettling, that reality might contain hidden variables we cannot perceive. Perhaps certain names carry resonance across time, acting as anchors in chaos. Or perhaps the universe, in its vast indifference, occasionally stumbles into patterns so precise they feel intentional. What does it mean when a name becomes armor? When identity itself, not skill or virtue, determines who lives and who drowns? The legend leaves us suspended between wonder and dread. Are we truly individuals navigating chance? Or are we echoes moving through a script written long before we drew our first breath, our names already inscribed on the survivors list? The Prophecy Paradox. In 1898, a decade before steel met iceberg in the North Atlantic, a writer named Morgan Robertson sat at his desk and composed a tragedy that should have remained fiction. His novella Futility told of a magnificent ocean liner called the Titan, deemed unsinkable, stretching 800 feet, powered by 3 propellers, racing at 25 knots through April waters when it struck ice on its starboard side. The ship carried too few lifeboats. Thousands perished in the freezing dark. 14 years later, the Titanic sailed with near-identical specifications, 882 feet long, 3 propellers, 22 knots through April seas, starboard impact, insufficient lifeboats, catastrophic loss of life. Robertson had not consulted blueprints or seers. He was simply a novelist crafting drama. Yet he had pre-written history with forensic precision, down to administrative failures no storyteller would invent unless they had witnessed them. This paradox unsettles our understanding of time itself. If the future is unwritten, how could a man describe events before their causes existed? Robertson claimed expertise in maritime engineering, but expertise cannot explain why he chose April, not the more dramatic winter months, or why he replicated the exact bureaucratic negligence that would doom real passengers. The coincidence suggests something deeper. Perhaps imagination occasionally brushes against timelines not yet manifest. Or perhaps reality contains hidden contours, archetypes of tragedy that repeat across centuries, waiting for the right conditions to materialize. The true mystery isn't whether Robertson possessed supernatural foresight. It's that the boundary between imagination and actuality appears thinner than we assume. When a story bleeds into history with such precision, we must wonder, are we authors of our destiny, or readers of a text already composed? In the silent space between a writer's pen and an iceberg's edge, time itself seems to hesitate, revealing that the future may not be a destination we approach, but a landscape we sometimes glimpse through cracks in the present. The Mirror King. In a quiet restaurant in Monza, Italy, King Umberto I of Italy once encountered a man who should not have existed. The restaurant owner bore his exact face, the same weathered features, the same build, even the identical handlebar mustache. Struck by this living mirror, the king invited the man to his table. What began as curiosity soon deepened into something uncanny. The owner's name was also Umberto. They had been born on the same day, March 14, 1844, in the same town. When the king asked about his wife, the man replied, Margarita. The queen's name was Margarita. The parallels tightened further. The owner had opened his restaurant on the precise date Umberto was crowned king. Two lives, unfolding in perfect synchrony across different social strata, royalty and commoner, yet following identical rhythms. Then came the final, chilling symmetry. The next morning, the king learned his double had been shot and killed in a mysterious accident. Shaken, Umberto prepared to depart the city. As his carriage pulled away, an anarchist stepped from the crowd and fired 4 shots. The king died instantly. Two men born on the same day, living mirrored lives, extinguished by bullets within hours of each other. This encounter transcends mere coincidence. It suggests that identity may not be as singular as we assume, that lives might echo across social boundaries like vibrations through a single instrument. Were these two Umbertos separate souls, or fragments of one consciousness experiencing existence through parallel lenses? The meeting invites a quiet contemplation. Beneath the surface distinctions of class and circumstance, how much of our lives are truly our own? Or do we all walk predetermined paths, our choices already reflected in strangers we may never meet, until the universe, for reasons beyond our understanding, decides to show us the mirror? Poe's Cannibal Prophecy. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe published the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, a novel filled with shipwrecks, starvation, and desperate men adrift in the South Atlantic. In its most haunting passage, for sailors stranded on a damaged vessel draw lots to determine who would be sacrificed so the others might survive. The victim, a young cabin boy named Richard Parker, is killed and consumed. Poe was crafting fiction, weaving horror from imagination alone. He had no way of knowing he was drafting a prophecy. 46 years later, the yacht Mignonette sank in those same waters. 4 real men escaped into a lifeboat with no food or fresh water. After weeks of drifting, their bodies wasting away, the 3 older sailors made a grim decision. They turned on the youngest among them, a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker, and killed him to sustain themselves. When rescued and brought to trial in England, the case became a global sensation. But for those who knew Poe's novel, a deeper chill settled in. The fictional victim and the real one shared not just a fate, but a name. This convergence transcends coincidence. Poe didn't merely imagine cannibalism at sea, a documented historical occurrence, but assigned a specific, uncommon name to his fictional victim decades before reality would echo it with surgical precision. The mind rebels at the implication. Did Poe somehow glimpse a future event? Or does reality occasionally bend toward narrative archetypes, as if certain stories possess gravitational pull across time? The true mystery lies not in supernatural foresight, but in the porous boundary between imagination and actuality. When a writer's pen seems to touch the fabric of future events, we confront a quiet truth. Perhaps time is not a river flowing in one direction, but a landscape where past, present, and future occasionally brush against one another, leaving traces we mistake for coincidence, but which may be something far more profound. In the silence between Poe's page and the ocean's depths, a name echoes twice, once in ink, once in blood, reminding us that reality's architecture may be far stranger than we dare to believe. The 50-Year Echo. On the morning of July 4, 1826, church bells rang across a young nation celebrating its golden anniversary. Parades unfurled through town squares, cannon fire echoed over fields, and citizens toasted the miracle of American independence. Yet in two quiet bedrooms 500 miles apart, the architects of that miracle were preparing for a final departure. Not with fanfare, but with a symmetry so precise it feels less like coincidence and more like cosmic punctuation. Thomas Jefferson, 83, lay fading at Monticello, his breath growing shallow as celebrations muffled through heavy curtains. 500 miles north, John Adams, 90, fought his own surrender in Massachusetts. These men had drafted the Declaration together, served as presidents, endured decades of bitter rivalry, then reconciled through tender letters in their twilight years. They were the last living witnesses to the Revolution's birth. And the universe chose this day, exactly 50 years to the hour since their signatures had birthed a nation, to close their chapter. Jefferson slipped away first, in the early afternoon, as the country toasted his legacy. Hours later, as sunset painted the sky, Adams whispered his final words, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." He was wrong. His friend had departed 5 hours earlier. Neither man knew the other had already crossed the threshold. Yet together, unwittingly, perfectly, they exited history on the exact anniversary of its most sacred document, as if their lives had been calibrated to a celestial clock. What does it mean when two souls synchronize their final breaths across distance and discord? This was not mere chance. It suggests that certain lives are woven into the fabric of historical moments with such intimacy that their rhythms echo the events they shaped. Jefferson and Adams did not merely witness history. They were history, breathing in its cadence until their last heartbeat matched its anniversary. In their shared departure, we glimpse a universe where time folds upon itself, where beginnings and endings meet in perfect circles, and where the architects of freedom sign their names not just to parchment, but to eternity itself. Twain's Celestial Contract. In November 1835, as Halley's Comet blazed across the night sky, a baby boy drew his first breath in a Missouri village. Samuel Clemens would grow to become Mark Twain, the voice of a nation, but he never forgot the cosmic visitor that heralded his arrival. Throughout his life, he felt tethered to that celestial wanderer, as if his existence ran not on mortal time, but on the comet's ancient rhythm. "I came in with Halley's Comet," he once mused. "It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." This was more than poetic fancy. In 1909, as the comet began its return journey after 76 years, the aging writer made a quiet prophecy to friends at his Connecticut home. He and the comet were unaccountable freaks who had arrived together and must depart together. To die any other way, he insisted, would be the greatest disappointment of his life. The universe, it seemed, had taken note. On April 21, 1910, as Halley's Comet reached its brilliant zenith, visible even in daylight, Twain's heart ceased beating. He had lived precisely one orbital cycle of his celestial companion, arriving with its light, departing with its return. This symmetry transcends coincidence. It suggests that certain lives may resonate with cosmic cycles beyond human comprehension, not through mysticism, but through a quiet alignment of time's hidden architecture. Twain didn't merely observe the heavens, he synchronized with them. His prophecy fulfilled itself not through supernatural intervention, but through an almost mathematical precision that leaves us wondering, do we each carry invisible contracts with the cosmos? Are some souls calibrated to celestial rhythms, their entrances and exits timed to astronomical events we barely notice? In Twain's passing, we glimpse a universe where human lives might echo cosmic patterns, not as puppets of fate, but as participants in a grander symphony. The comet didn't take him, it simply came to collect a traveler who had always known his ticket was round trip. Hawking's Temporal Bridge. On January 8, 1942, as Europe lay shrouded in war's darkness, a child was born in Oxford whose mind would one day map the birth of the universe itself. Stephen Hawking entered existence on the 300th anniversary of Galileo Galilei's death, the man who first turned a telescope toward the heavens and declared that Earth was not the center of all things. 3 centuries separated their mortal spans, yet time had woven their legacies into a single thread. Hawking would spend his life expanding the very cosmic vision Galileo had dared to glimpse. Then, on March 14, 2018, Pi Day, the mathematical constant that curves through spacetime, Hawking's breath stilled. He departed on Albert Einstein's birthday, the architect of relativity whose equations Hawking had spent decades refining, testing, and transcending. 3 titans of cosmic understanding, linked not by design but by the silent arithmetic of dates. Galileo's death cradled Hawking's birth, Einstein's birth cradled Hawking's death. A perfect temporal bridge spanning 4 centuries of human curiosity. This alignment invites quiet contemplation. These were not random men, they were successive torchbearers in humanity's quest to comprehend spacetime itself. Galileo shattered Earth's centrality, Einstein revealed time's flexibility, Hawking described black holes singing with quantum whispers. Their lives formed a relay race across centuries, each passing the baton at the precise moment the previous runner stepped aside. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when pattern aligns with purpose so elegantly, we sense something deeper, that certain souls may be drawn to specific moments in history's unfolding, not by fate's hand, but by resonance. As if the universe requires particular minds at particular junctures, and time itself arranges the meeting. In Hawking's bridge between past and future, we glimpse a cosmos that may not be indifferent after all. Not through divine intervention, but through a subtler truth, that human consciousness and cosmic time might occasionally synchronize, 2 rhythms finding harmony across the void. The greatest minds don't merely study the universe. Sometimes, time itself seems to study them back. The war's bookends. In 1861, Wilmer McLean was simply a Virginia farmer trying to live quietly near a stream called Bull Run. He had no interest in history, until history arrived uninvited at his doorstep. The first major battle of the Civil War erupted on his property. A Union artillery shell tore through his summer kitchen, scattering his family's lunch across the floor. Smoke and screams filled the air where his children had played. McLean made a rational decision. He would outrun the war. He packed his family and moved 150 miles south to a dusty, insignificant village called Appomattox Courthouse, a place with no strategic value, no rail lines, no reason for armies to notice it. He believed he had escaped. For 4 years, the war raged across the continent. McLean watched from his new home as distant battles claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Then, in April 1865, as General Robert E. Lee's starving army retreated through Virginia, fate performed its final, impossible turn. Lee needed a private home to meet Ulysses S. Grant for surrender negotiations. Of all the houses in all of Virginia, his aide selected Wilmer McLean's parlor. The war that had begun with a cannonball in McLean's kitchen now ended with a handshake in his living room. He had fled violence only to become its ultimate witness, the reluctant landlord of America's bloodiest chapter. This synchronicity transcends irony. It suggests that certain lives become unwitting anchors for historical turning points, not through choice, but through a geometry of circumstance we cannot perceive. McLean didn't shape the war shaped itself around him, as if his existence provided the necessary frame for its beginning and end. What does it mean when a single life bookends a nation's transformation? Perhaps history requires witnesses, ordinary souls who stand at the thresholds between eras, holding space for endings and beginnings. In McLean's quiet parlor, we glimpse a universe where chance and destiny blur, where running from history only leads us to its most sacred moments, waiting patiently for us to arrive. The Double Assassination. In the autumn of 1863, at a crowded train station in Jersey City, a young man named Robert Todd Lincoln stumbled backward as a departing train lurched unexpectedly. His heel caught the platform's edge, and he tumbled into the narrow, grinding space between steel wheels and stone. In that suspended moment, between life and crushing death, a hand reached down from the crowd. It seized his coat collar and hauled him back to safety. The rescuer was Edwin Booth, America's most celebrated Shakespearean actor, a man whose voice could command theaters from Boston to San Francisco. The two exchanged brief thanks, unaware they were participating in a symmetry far larger than themselves. 17 months later, Edwin's younger brother, John Wilkes Booth, stepped into Ford's Theater and fired a single shot that would fracture American history. The assassin who destroyed the Lincoln family had a brother who had, unknowingly, preserved it. This was not mere irony. It was a perfect moral equation written across time, one brother taking a father's life in a theater, the other saving the son's life on a platform. The universe had balanced its ledger with surgical precision. What does it mean when tragedy and salvation arrive through the same bloodline? This convergence suggests that history may contain hidden symmetries, counterweights that maintain equilibrium even as chaos unfolds. Edwin never recovered from his brother's act. He retired from the stage, haunted by the knowledge that his name would forever be tied to murder rather than art. Yet, in that brief rescue at the station, he had already written a quieter epilogue. The Lincoln line would continue. Robert would live to old age, father children, and carry his father's legacy forward. In this double gesture, one hand pulling life from danger, another delivering death from shadow, we glimpse a cosmos that may not be random, but rhythmically balanced. Not through divine intervention, but through a deeper architecture where every action finds its counterweight, often in ways we cannot perceive until long after the moment has passed. The Booth brothers became living proof that within every catastrophe, a seed of preservation may already be growing, unseen, patient, waiting for the hour of its quiet revelation. The sandwich that broke Europe. On a sun-drenched June morning in 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's motorcade wound through Sarajevo, its occupants unaware that history balanced on the thinnest of threads. The first assassination attempt had already failed. A bomb bounced harmlessly off the car. Shaken but alive, the Archduke insisted on visiting wounded bystanders. His driver, unfamiliar with the revised route, made a wrong turn onto Franz Joseph Street. As the car stalled while reversing, a young nationalist named Gavrilo Princip happened to be standing there, having abandoned his earlier attempt and stepped into a delicatessen for a sandwich and coffee. He had given up. He was leaving. But the stalled car delivered its target to his doorstep. 2 shots. 2 deaths. Within weeks, empires mobilized. 4 years later, 16 million lay dead. This was not destiny. It was chaos theory made flesh, a wrong turn, a stalled engine, a casual meal converging with lethal precision. Had the driver known the route, had the car not stalled, had Princip not paused for bread and meat, none of it might have happened. Europe's fate turned not on grand strategy or historical inevitability, but on the mundane physics of a carburetor and the human need for sustenance. The mind trembles at the implication. Civilization rests not on bedrock, but on sand. We imagine history as a river flowing inevitably toward its deltas. Yet this moment reveals the truth. History is a house of cards, and a single breath can collapse it. The sandwich that Princip ate was not a symbol of fate, but of contingency, the universe's indifference to human consequence. In that pause between bites, the 20th century was rewritten. What does it mean when world-altering events hinge on trivialities? Perhaps it humbles us. Perhaps it reminds us that every choice, every turn we take, every pause we allow, ripples through time in ways we cannot foresee. The sandwich did not break Europe. Europe broke itself. But it needed only the gentlest nudge, a moment of hunger, a stalled engine, a wrong turn, to begin its fall. The cigarette that saved America. September 13, 1862. A Union corporal named Barton Mitchell paused beside a shaded oak tree near Frederick, Maryland. His eye caught a glint of white, a rectangle of paper wrapped around 3 cigars, discarded carelessly in the grass. He unwrapped it. What he held was not tobacco advertisement, but the complete battle plans of General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, troop positions, march routes, and the Confederacy's entire invasion strategy for Maryland. Lee's chief of staff had lost them. A courier had set them down. Someone had forgotten. In that moment of absent-mindedness, the fate of a nation shifted. General George McClellan received the papers within hours. He now held Lee's playbook, every move anticipated, every vulnerability exposed. Though his caution prevented total victory, the intelligence allowed Union forces to intercept Lee at Antietam Creek days later. The bloodiest single day in American history ensued, but the Union held. Lincoln seized the moment to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the war's purpose and preventing European powers from recognizing the Confederacy. All of it hinged on a forgotten cigar wrapper. This was not strategy or valor that altered history. It was distraction. A moment of human inattention, a hand setting down papers to light a smoke, unraveled a meticulously crafted campaign. The mind struggles with the implication. Civilizations do not always fall through grand failures, but through microscopic lapses. A general's focus, a courier's haste, the simple human need for nicotine, all conspired to preserve a fragile union. What does it mean when destiny turns on such trivialities? Perhaps it reveals history's true texture, not a tapestry of great men and monumental decisions, but a fragile web where the smallest thread, when severed, brings the entire structure trembling. The cigarette did not save America. But in its casual abandonment, it reminded us that even empires balance on moments of ordinary forgetfulness, where a single lapse in attention can echo across centuries, and a nation's survival rests not on glory, but on what someone left behind while reaching for a light. Kokura's Lucky Clouds. On the morning of August 9, 1945, a B-29 bomber named Boxcar carried the second atomic bomb toward its primary target, Kokura, Japan's largest arsenal. The mission orders were explicit, visual confirmation required before release. No radar drops. No guesswork. As the plane approached, the crew expected clear skies over the industrial city. Instead, they found a veil of white. Smoke from a firebombing raid on nearby Yaata had drifted overnight, merging with morning clouds to shroud Kokura completely. For 45 minutes, the bomber circled 3 times, searching for a break in the haze. Below, hundreds of thousands of civilians walked to work, unaware that annihilation hovered directly above them, waiting for a single gap in the atmosphere. The gap never appeared. With fuel dwindling and anti-aircraft fire tracking their position, the pilot turned south toward Nagasaki, the secondary target. There, the clouds parted just enough for visual confirmation. The bomb fell. The city vanished in light. This was not strategy or morality that spared Kokura. It was meteorology. A drifting smoke plume, a shift in wind direction, the random confluence of water vapor and combustion. These invisible forces became the difference between life and vaporization for an entire population. The mind struggles with the implication. Survival was not earned through virtue, preparation, or even geography. It was granted by weather. What does it mean when fate rests not on human choice, but on atmospheric conditions beyond anyone's control? Kokura's salvation reveals a universe indifferent to merit, where the boundary between existence and oblivion can be a single layer of cloud. We imagine history as shaped by great decisions, yet here, civilization's trajectory pivoted on the breath of the sky itself. In that suspended moment above the clouds, we glimpse our profound fragility, not masters of destiny, but passengers on a planet where the wind decides who lives to see tomorrow. The Crossword Leak. In the spring of 1944, as Allied forces prepared the greatest amphibious invasion in history, British intelligence faced a puzzle within a puzzle. Across southern England, soldiers whispered codenames in hushed tones: Overlord, Neptune, Omaha, Utah, Mulberry. These words were state secrets, compartmentalized, guarded, punishable by court-martial if leaked. Yet beginning in May, they began appearing in the most innocent of places, the London Daily Telegraph's daily crossword puzzle. First, Utah, on May 2nd. Then, Omaha, on May 22nd. Overlord, on May 27th. Mulberry, on June 1st. 5 days before D-Day, Neptune filled the final square. MI5 descended upon the puzzle's creator, a quiet schoolteacher named Leonard Daw, convinced he was a spy. But Daw was no traitor. Investigation revealed a stranger truth. His students had absorbed these words while playing near military camps, where soldiers, unaware they were speaking secrets, had let codenames slip into casual conversation. The children, innocent vessels, carried the words back to school. Daw, compiling puzzles from student suggestions, unknowingly wove military secrets into brain teasers for London commuters. Information had not been stolen, it had seeped. Like water through cracks, it moved through channels no one had designed, carried by voices that didn't know they were carrying anything at all. This incident reveals a quiet law of reality. Secrets resist containment. Human attempts to wall off knowledge often fail not through betrayal, but through the gentle osmosis of everyday life. Words want to be spoken. Information wants to flow. In Daw's classroom, the architecture of secrecy dissolved not through malice, but through children playing hopscotch near barbed wire, reminding us that the most fortified boundaries are often breached by the most innocent pathways. What does it mean when classified operations leak through crossword grids? Perhaps it humbles our illusion of control. Perhaps it suggests that truth, like light, finds every aperture, however small. In the space between a soldier's careless remark and a child's pencil mark, we glimpse reality's quiet rebellion against silence. The universe, it seems, prefers connection over concealment. Oswald's random job. In the autumn of 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald needed work. Recently returned from the Soviet Union, adrift and restless, he relied on his wife Marina's temporary lodging with a Quaker woman named Ruth Payne in Irving, Texas. There, in the quiet rhythm of suburban life, a thread of fate began weaving itself, not through conspiracy, but through casual human connection. Ruth's neighbor, Linnie Mae Randall, happened to know the building supervisor at the Texas School Book Depository. Over a cup of coffee one afternoon, she mentioned a job opening. A phone call was made. Oswald was hired on October 15th. He had no way of knowing that 6 weeks later, President Kennedy's motorcade route would be altered, diverted from the Stemmons Freeway onto Houston Street, then a sharp right turn onto Elm Street, placing the depository's 6th-floor window directly in the path of the presidential limousine. The job that found Oswald through a neighbor's small talk became the perfect vantage point for history's pivot. Not because anyone planned it, but because ordinary lives intersect with extraordinary moments through invisible geometries we cannot perceive until afterward. This convergence unsettles our faith in randomness. Oswald didn't seek the depository for its view, he sought it for wages. The route change wasn't engineered for assassination, it was made for better crowd visibility. Yet these independent variables aligned with surgical precision, as if the universe had arranged a meeting between a disaffected man and a passing president through nothing more than coffee conversations and municipal logistics. What does it mean when world-altering violence emerges not from grand design, but from the gentle drift of everyday life? Perhaps it reveals that history's turning points are not always forged in smoke-filled rooms, but in kitchens over coffee, where a neighbor's remark becomes the fulcrum upon which centuries tilt. In Oswald's accidental positioning, we glimpse our shared vulnerability, that each of us walks corridors of chance where microscopic choices, accepting a job, changing a route, pouring a cup of coffee, may echo far beyond our imagining, binding strangers together in moments that will one day be called destiny. The lightning magnet. Roy Sullivan carried the sky's attention like a curse. Between 1942 and 1977, lightning struck him 7 times, not once in dramatic spectacle, but repeatedly, almost casually, as if the atmosphere had marked him for study. The first strike blew his toenails off. The second seared his eyebrows. The third set his hair ablaze. He extinguished it with a wet towel and drove to a ranger station. The fourth burned his shoulder. The fifth set his hair on fire again, this time in his truck. The sixth struck his ankle. The seventh hit his chest and stomach. He survived them all, earning the Guinness record and the nickname Spark Ranger. Yet the final strike came not from clouds, but from within. In 1983, Sullivan took his own life, reportedly over a failed romance. The sky had spared him, the heart did not. Probability mathematicians calculate the odds of a single lightning strike at roughly 1 in a million per year. 7 strikes approach statistical impossibility, like winning the lottery while being struck by a meteor. Yet Sullivan was no lightning rod by profession. He was a park ranger who spent time outdoors, yes, but no more than thousands of others who never felt heaven's touch even once. His case suggests something unsettling. Randomness may not be evenly distributed. Some souls seem to orbit chaos, drawing improbable events like metal to magnet. What does it mean when the universe singles out one body for repeated visitation by a force that ignores millions? Perhaps Sullivan wasn't unlucky, he was a witness. A man positioned at the intersection of atmospheric physics and human fragility, reminding us that chance has texture, geography, even preference. Or perhaps his story reveals a deeper truth, that we misunderstand randomness itself. What appears chaotic may contain hidden attractors, patterns too subtle for our instruments, but legible to the storm. In Sullivan's scorched silhouette, we glimpse our own vulnerability, not to lightning, but to the quiet realization that the universe's indifference might occasionally look like attention, and that being noticed by chaos is its own kind of solitude. The Unbreakable Woman. Violet Jessup moved through catastrophe with the quiet grace of someone who had made an unspoken agreement with the sea. In 1911, she survived the collision of the RMS Olympic with a British warship. 1 year later, she boarded her sister ship, the supposedly unsinkable Titanic. When ice tore through the hull on that April night, Jessup was placed in Lifeboat 16, ordered to care for a baby to calm the passengers. She rode through darkness, the cries of the drowning fading behind her. 4 years later, war transformed the Britannic into a hospital ship. Jessup served as a nurse. When a mine exploded near Kia Island in 1916, the ship began its rapid descent. She jumped from a lowering lifeboat to avoid being drawn into the spinning propellers, struck her head on the hull, sank briefly beneath the churning water, then surfaced to swim toward rescue. 3 ships. 3 disasters. 1 woman emerging each time with little more than a bump on the head and a rescued infant in her arms. Statisticians would call this impossible. Sailors called it witchcraft. Jessup herself attributed it to prayer and practicality. Yet the pattern transcends luck. It suggests that certain individuals may carry an invisible resilience, not supernatural invincibility, but a subtle alignment with survival's geometry. She was never in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was always near a lifeboat, always given a task that kept her moving toward safety, always positioned at the precise edge where catastrophe brushes against deliverance without claiming it. What does it mean when one life repeatedly navigates the narrow passage between death and survival? Perhaps Jessup was not blessed by fate, but attuned to its rhythms, reading the sea's moods with a calm that others lacked. Or perhaps her story reveals a quieter truth, that survival is not merely chance, but a collaboration between preparation, presence, and the universe's inexplicable leniency towards certain souls. In her unbroken passage through history's most famous sinkings, we glimpse a mystery not of invincibility, but of grace, the fragile space where human composure meets cosmic mercy, and life, against all odds, continues. The Double Baby Catch. Detroit, 1937. Joseph Figlock walked home beneath a tenement building when a sudden cry pierced the air. A baby had tumbled from a 4th-story window, a tiny body arcing toward pavement. Without thought, Figlock lunged. His arms opened. The child landed safely in his grasp, unharmed. Mother rushed down, weeping with gratitude. Figlock walked away, a quiet hero in a city of millions. 1 year later, on the same block, beneath the same building, Figlock again heard a cry from above. Again, a small form plummeted through air. Again, he caught the child, this time with his shoulder absorbing the impact. When the stunned mother descended, recognition flickered between them. It was the same woman, the same infant. Her son had once more escaped an open window, and the universe had once more positioned Joseph Figlock precisely where he needed to be. This was not skill or vigilance that saved the child twice. It was geometry. The same man, the same street, the same falling trajectory converging across 365 days. as if time had folded upon itself, repeating a moment of grace with impossible fidelity. Probability cannot explain this. Lightning may strike twice in one place, but a falling child finding the same pair of arms a year apart enters the realm of the uncanny. What does it mean when rescue becomes ritual? Perhaps Figlock was not merely lucky, he was assigned. Not by divine decree, but by a subtler architecture of connection. Certain souls may orbit specific lives, drawn together across time to fulfill quiet contracts written in the language of proximity and timing. Or perhaps the event reveals something about reality itself, that moments of profound significance sometimes echo, as if the universe requires reinforcement of its own mercies. In Figlock's double gesture, we glimpse a cosmos that may not be random, but rhythmically compassionate. Not through miracles, but through the gentle recurrence of protection, where one man's path crosses another's peril not once, but twice, reminding us that some threads in the tapestry of existence are woven with intentional care, even when no hand appears to guide the needle. The nuclear survivor. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Tsutomu Yamaguchi stood 3 kilometers from ground zero in Hiroshima. The flash came first, a light brighter than 1,000 suns, then the pressure wave that shredded his eardrums, burned his arms, and hurled him into a potato field. He survived. 2 days later, bandaged and dazed, he boarded a train home to Nagasaki. On August 9, as he described the Hiroshima blast to his skeptical boss, another flash filled the sky. The second atomic bomb detonated. Yamaguchi survived again. This was not resilience alone. It was statistical impossibility made flesh. 2 nuclear detonations, each vaporizing everything within a mile radius, each claiming tens of thousands of lives, and one man walking through both infernos with wounds that would heal. He lived to 93, outlasting empires and ideologies, carrying in his body the silent testimony of humanity's most terrible power turned twice against a single witness. What does it mean when one life becomes the sole thread connecting 2 apocalypses? Yamaguchi was not a soldier or statesman. He was a ship designer, a quiet man who happened to be in the wrong cities on the wrong mornings. Yet his survival suggests something unsettling, that within absolute destruction, pockets of mercy persist, not through divine favor, but through the chaotic geometry of blast radii, building shadows, and the random orientation of a body in space at the exact microsecond of detonation. His existence became a living paradox. The man who should not have been, twice. In his longevity, we glimpse a quiet defiance, not of death, but of finality itself. The bomb sought to erase, Yamaguchi persisted. Not as a hero, but as a question mark etched into history. Why him? Why twice? Perhaps the answer lies not in destiny, but in humility. His survival reminds us that even at civilization's darkest thresholds, life finds fissures, narrow, improbable, but sufficient. And sometimes, one man's breath becomes the fragile bridge between annihilation and memory, carrying the weight of 2 suns that rose only to remind us how thin the veil between existence and nothingness truly is. The Boy in the Falls. July 9, 1960. 7-year-old Roger Woodward wore a life jacket not as protection, but as costume, playing near Niagara River with his father's friend. A boat engine failed. The current seized them. Within minutes, they were swept toward the precipice where 3,160 tons of water per second plunge 167 feet into churning mist. The man drowned instantly. Roger, small and light, was swallowed by the cataract, a child hurtling through white chaos toward certain death. He did not die. The life jacket buoyed him through the violent descent. He surfaced in the Devil's Pool below the falls, battered but breathing. And in that moment of impossible survival, another convergence occurred. The Maid of the Mist tourist boat, which had departed its dock at its regularly scheduled time, happened to be passing through the exact stretch of river where a child's head broke the surface. Crew members spotted him. They pulled him aboard. A doctor happened to be among the passengers. Roger lived. This was not planning or heroism. It was synchronization. A failed engine, a child's weight, a life jacket's buoyancy, a boat's timetable, a doctor's vacation, all independent variables aligning with surgical precision at the threshold of annihilation. Probability suggests he should have perished 1,000 times over, in the fall's impact, in the whirlpool's grip, in the minutes before rescue. Yet each variable tilted toward mercy. What does it mean when the universe arranges salvation through mundane mechanics? Not divine intervention, but the quiet arithmetic of timing and physics conspiring to preserve a single consciousness. Roger's survival reveals that grace may not descend from above, it may emerge from the hidden geometry of ordinary moments, a boat leaving dock at 2:17 p.m., a tourist choosing that particular cruise, a jacket's foam density calibrated just so. In The Boy Who Fell and Lived, we glimpse a cosmos that may not care for us, but occasionally, through the blind dance of cause and effect, creates pockets of mercy large enough for a child to slip through. Not miracle, but convergence. Not destiny, but the fragile, fleeting alignment of 1,000 ordinary things choosing, for one impossible moment, to become extraordinary. The perfect eclipse. For a fleeting moment every few years, day becomes twilight. The sun's brilliance dims to a silver ring, stars emerge at noon, and the world falls into an unearthly hush. This phenomenon, unique in our solar system, exists because of a cosmic coincidence so precise it feels intentional. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and exactly 400 times closer to Earth. This ratio allows the moon's disk to perfectly cover the sun's face during totality, revealing the corona's ethereal halo. No other planet in our system enjoys this alignment. Mars' moons are too small, Jupiter's too large. Earth alone stands at this singular vantage point. This is not mere happenstance. The moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, about 1.5 inches per year. Millions of years ago, it appeared larger, completely obscuring the corona. Millions of years hence, it will appear too small to fully cover the sun. We exist in a narrow window of cosmic time, perhaps the only era when perfect eclipses occur. And within this window, we evolved the curiosity to witness them, the intelligence to understand them, and the wonder to be transformed by them. What does it mean that consciousness arose precisely when the heavens offered this spectacle? Perhaps it is pure chance, a fleeting alignment in an indifferent universe. Or perhaps it hints at something deeper, that the conditions for life and the conditions for awe may be intertwined. The perfect eclipse has shaped human history, inspiring myths, halting battles, and revealing Einstein's relativity when stars bent around the sun's hidden mass. In that darkness, we discovered light's true nature. The eclipse does not prove design, but it invites humility. In the exact match of two distant spheres, we glimpse a universe that, for reasons beyond our knowing, permits moments of sublime harmony, where celestial mechanics and human wonder converge in a silence that asks not how, but why. And in that question, the cosmos seems to whisper back, look, remember, you are here, now, to witness this. Fleming's Open Window. September 1928. Alexander Fleming returned to his cluttered St. Mary's Hospital laboratory after a vacation to find chaos. Petri dishes stacked haphazardly, cultures contaminated, months of work seemingly ruined. Most scientists would have discarded the mess and started anew. But Fleming paused. One dish caught his eye, a Staphylococcus culture invaded by a peculiar blue-green mold. Around the mold's perimeter, the bacteria had vanished, leaving a perfect halo of emptiness. The mold had killed them. The spore had drifted through an open window from a mycology lab downstairs, a random visitor carried on a breeze Fleming never noticed. His carelessness, leaving dishes uncovered, had created the exact conditions for discovery. Had he been tidier, had the window been closed, had he discarded the dish immediately, penicillin might have remained hidden for decades. Instead, his messiness became medicine's genesis. One mold spore, one open window, one curious glance, and the antibiotic age was born. This moment reveals a quiet truth about progress. Breakthroughs often arrive not through rigid planning, but through porous boundaries. Fleming's genius wasn't foresight, it was attention to accident. He saw meaning where others saw contamination. The universe had delivered a gift wrapped in disorder, and he had the humility to receive it. What does it mean when humanity's greatest medical advance emerged from negligence? Perhaps it suggests that discovery requires vulnerability, to mess, to chance, to the unexpected visitor. We build laboratories to control variables, yet the most transformative insights often slip through cracks we never intended to leave open. Fleming's window reminds us that wisdom sometimes means leaving space for the uninvited, the stray thought, the wandering spore, the beautiful accident that rewrites destiny. In that sunlit London lab, a single breath of air carried salvation for millions unborn. Not through design, but through openness. And in that truth lies a gentle invitation, to remain curious when order fails, to see grace in the unexpected, and to remember that sometimes the most profound gifts arrive not when we seek them, but when we leave a window open. The constants of creation. Imagine a universe where gravity is slightly stronger. Stars burn hotter, faster, dying in millions of years instead of billions. No time for planets to form, for life to stir in primordial seas. Now imagine electromagnetism weakened by a fraction. Atoms cannot bond. No molecules. No water. No DNA. The universe becomes a thin soup of solitary particles drifting in eternal cold. Our reality balances on a razor's edge. The strong nuclear force holds atomic nuclei together with precision calibrated to 0.001%. The cosmological constant, the energy of empty space, permits galaxies to form rather than flying apart or collapsing instantly. Gravity, electromagnetism, the weak and strong forces, each tuned to values so specific that altering any by a hair's breadth would render existence impossible. Physicists call this the fine-tuning problem. The universe appears not merely permissive of life, but anticipatory, structured with parameters that allow consciousness to emerge billions of years after the Big Bang. This is not design proven, nor randomness dismissed. It is a quiet invitation to wonder. Are we the beneficiaries of infinite universes, a multiverse where every possible combination of constants plays out, and we simply inhabit the rare realm where life became possible? Or does the precision hint at something deeper, that consciousness and cosmos are not separate, but intertwined from the beginning? The constants do not speak. They simply are, holding stars in their courses, binding atoms into cells, allowing a mind to gaze upward and ask why. In their silent balance, we encounter humility, that our existence rests not on strength or virtue, but on a cosmic equilibrium struck before time began. We are not accidents in an indifferent void. We are participants in a universe that, for reasons beyond our knowing, chose parameters that would one day permit a question to be asked, and a sky to be wondered at. Archipov's Veto. October 27, 1962. Deep beneath the Sargasso Sea, the Soviet submarine B-59 drifted in darkness. For days, American destroyers had hunted it. Now they dropped practice depth charges, shaking the hull like thunder. Inside, heat soared past 45 degrees Celsius. Batteries dwindled. Carbon dioxide thickened the air. Captain Valentin Savitsky, cut off from Moscow, believed war had begun. He ordered the nuclear torpedo armed. The political officer concurred. 2 votes for Armageddon. But a third voice remained silent. Vasily Archipov, flotilla commander, studied the captain's sweat-streaked face. He knew the charges were signals, not attacks. He knew surfacing meant humiliation, but also truth. In that sweltering metal tomb, with 2 men ready to unleash fire upon Florida's coast, Archipov spoke a single word: no. His veto was not heroism. It was clarity. While others saw only threat, he perceived ambiguity, and chose patience over certainty. The submarine surfaced. Contact was restored. The moment passed. Historians later agreed, had Archipov yielded, America would have retaliated. The Soviet Union would have answered. Hundreds of millions might have perished before winter. This was not fate intervening. It was one man's breath in a suffocating room, his refusal to mistake noise for war. Archipov carried no special authority beyond his rank. He possessed no prophecy. He simply held space for doubt when others demanded action. In that space, civilization survived. What does it mean when humanity's survival hinges on a single conscience in a sealed room? Perhaps it reveals that history's pivot points are not grand treaties or battlefield victories, but quiet moments of restraint, where one person's hesitation becomes the fulcrum upon which epochs tilt. Archipov did not save the world through strength, but through stillness. His legacy whispers a fragile truth, that our greatest power may not be to act, but to wait, to let the next breath arrive before deciding the fate of all who follow. Petrov's intuition. September 26, 1983. The Cold War hung at its most fragile point. Soviet tensions simmered after the KAL-007 shoot-down weeks earlier. Deep inside Serpukhov, 15, a bunker outside Moscow, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov monitored screens glowing with silent data. Just after midnight, alarms shattered the stillness. The Oko satellite system flashed a chilling message. 5 Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles had launched from the United States. The display read, "Launch." Then, "Missile strike." Protocol was absolute. Report immediately to superiors. They would retaliate within minutes. Nuclear winter would follow. But Petrov hesitated. Something felt wrong. A genuine first strike, he reasoned, would involve hundreds of missiles, not 5. The satellites had been rushed into service. He distrusted their reliability. His console showed no corroborating radar confirmation. In that suspended moment, between machine certainty and human doubt, he made a choice that would remain secret for 17 years. He declared it a false alarm. He was correct. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds had tricked the satellite's infrared sensors. Petrov's intuition, his willingness to question algorithmic authority, had preserved civilization. Yet he was reprimanded for incomplete paperwork. No medal, no recognition. Just a quiet man who, for 1 hour, stood between humanity and extinction. What does it mean when survival depends not on technology's perfection, but on a single human's capacity for doubt? Petrov's moment reveals a fragile truth. Our most sophisticated systems remain vulnerable to the very thing they seek to eliminate, uncertainty. And in that vulnerability lies our salvation. Machines see patterns, humans sense context. Algorithms demand action, intuition permits pause. In Petrov's silent rebellion against certainty, we glimpse our deepest strength, the courage to say "I don't know" when the world demands a verdict. Not heroism, but humility. Not faith in systems, but trust in the quiet voice that whispers wait. That night, one man's hesitation became the space where tomorrow was allowed to exist, a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is to doubt the screen before you, and choose mercy over certainty. The Cursed Car. September 30th, 1955. James Dean died at 24, his silver Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard, shattered on a California highway. The car was towed to a garage, its twisted frame awaiting salvage. But the story did not end there. Within days, the mechanic who repaired its engine died in a fiery workshop explosion. The physician who pronounced Dean dead perished in a car crash while driving the Porsche's engine block to an exhibition. A Swiss racing driver who purchased the car's transmission was killed weeks later in a high-speed accident. The vehicle's remains, scattered to different owners, seemed to carry a residue of tragedy, each fragment trailing misfortune like smoke. This was not mere superstition. It was pattern. The Porsche itself vanished mysteriously while being transported, never recovered, never found. As if the universe had decided some objects must be unmade after serving their purpose. The curse narrative invites a quiet question. Can trauma imprint upon matter? Not through supernatural haunting, but through what psychologists call emotional contagion, our tendency to project meaning onto objects touched by tragedy. Yet the statistical clustering of accidents around this car's fragments remains unsettling. What does it mean when an object appears to carry fate within its metal? Perhaps the curse was never in the Porsche itself, but in the attention it gathered, the morbid fascination that drew risk-takers and gamblers to its remnants, creating self-fulfilling prophecies. Or perhaps it reveals a deeper truth, that certain moments of violent transition leave echoes in the physical world, not as ghosts, but as gravitational pulls on human behavior. We are drawn to tragedy's artifacts, and in that attraction, we sometimes recreate the very drama we seek to possess. In the vanished chassis of Little Bastard, we glimpse our own relationship with mortality, not as abstract concept, but as something we try to hold, examine, and understand through the objects left behind. The car's curse may be nothing more than our refusal to let tragedy rest quietly. And in that refusal, we become participants in the very stories we believe we are merely observing. The Twin Denises. March 12, 1951. On opposite sides of the Atlantic, two newspapers delivered identical gifts to their readers. In America, Hank Ketchum's Dennis the Menace debuted in syndication, a blonde-haired boy in striped shirt and overalls, perpetually exasperating his neighbor Mr. Wilson. That same morning, across the ocean, Britain's Beano magazine introduced its own Dennis the Menace, a black-haired scamp in red and black jersey, tormenting his nemesis Nasha. Neither creator knew of the other's work. No communication crossed the Atlantic. Yet two artists, working in isolation, had conjured near-identical characters bearing the same name, the same spirit of joyful chaos, arriving on the very same day. This was not plagiarism or coincidence in the ordinary sense. It was synchronicity, the spontaneous emergence of matching ideas across disconnected minds. Carl Jung might have called it evidence of the collective unconscious, archetypes waiting beneath human awareness, rising simultaneously when cultural conditions ripened. Rupert Sheldrake might suggest morphic resonance, a field of shared mental patterns that new creations tap into, like radio waves awaiting receivers. What does it mean when imagination blooms identically across continents? Perhaps certain characters exist not as inventions, but as inevitabilities, archetypal energies that seek expression when a culture needs them. Post-war societies on both sides of the ocean craved a figure who embodied innocent rebellion, a child unburdened by adult anxieties. The universe, it seems, delivered the same answer twice. In the Twin Denises, we glimpse a quiet truth. Creativity may not always be solitary. Sometimes, minds separated by oceans tune to the same frequency, drawing from a shared well of human experience deeper than individual consciousness. Not telepathy, but resonance. Not copying, but converging. Two pens, one impulse. Two shores, one mischievous boy waiting to be born, reminding us that beneath our separateness, we may all be dreaming the same dreams, just waiting for the right moment to wake and draw them into light. Handel and Hendrix. In a quiet corner of Mayfair, two houses stand side by side on Brook Street, unassuming brick facades holding a secret across centuries. From 1723 until his death in 1759, George Frederick Handel composed within number 25, the Messiah, water music, and fugues that would define Baroque grandeur. 200 years later, in 1968, Jimi Hendrix moved into number 23. There, he tuned his Stratocaster, layered feedback into poetry, and reshaped sound itself. The men never met. Yet their creative spirits inhabited adjacent rooms, separated by 2 centuries, united by 20 feet of London brickwork. This proximity transcends coincidence. It suggests that certain places may channel creative energy across time, not through mystical properties, but through subtle harmonics of human expression. Handel's counterpoint and Hendrix's distortion seem worlds apart, yet both sought to bend sound into transcendence. One through divine order, the other through liberated chaos. The same street absorbed both frequencies. The same air carried both vibrations, separated only by the slow turning of calendars. What does it mean when genius echoes through the same geography across centuries? Perhaps creativity flows not solely from individual minds, but through conduits in space itself, locations where the veil between ordinary and extraordinary thins. Or perhaps we simply recognize patterns where none exist, projecting meaning onto proximity. Yet the resonance remains. 2 revolutionaries, 2 languages of sound, 2 souls drawn to the same quiet street to rewrite music's possibilities. In the silent space between those 2 doorways, time folds. Not as miracle, but as invitation, to consider that places may hold memory, that walls may absorb inspiration, and that the universe occasionally arranges its artists with poetic precision. Handel and Hendrix never shared a conversation. but in the geometry of Brook Street, their spirits met, reminding us that creation may be less about who we are, and more about where, and when, we choose to listen. The 9/11 Numerology. In the aftermath of collective trauma, the human mind searches for anchors, patterns to impose order upon chaos. September 11, 2001 became a wound in global consciousness, and in that wound, certain numbers began to echo. Flight 11 struck first. The towers stood 110 stories tall, 11 tens. The date itself, 9/11, or 9 plus 1 plus 1 is equal to 11. The first plane hit the North Tower's 93rd floor, some sources cite 94th to 98th range. The South Tower was struck near the 78th floor. Together, 93 plus 78 is equal to 171. 1 plus 7 plus 1 is equal to 9, completing the date's numerology. New York City contains 11 letters. So does Afghanistan. So does the Pentagon. These patterns emerged not from design, but from the mind's quiet rebellion against randomness. Psychologists call this apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections within random data. After catastrophe, we instinctively seek hidden architecture beneath the surface of events, as if meaning might soften the blow of senseless loss. The number 11, with its mirrored symmetry, becomes a psychological refuge, a suggestion that even horror obeys unseen laws. Yet this impulse carries danger. Pattern seeking can become a prison, where coincidence transforms into conspiracy, and grief curdles into suspicion. The universe may be indifferent to our need for meaning. The towers had 110 floors because architectural engineering demanded it, not numerology. Flight numbers followed airline sequencing. Dates are human constructs imposed upon celestial mechanics. What does it mean when tragedy births geometry in the mind? Perhaps it reveals our deepest vulnerability, that we cannot bear pure randomness. We would rather believe in hidden order, even dark order, than accept that annihilation arrives without reason. In the echoing 11s, we glimpse not cosmic design, but the human soul's quiet plea, let this mean something. Let the suffering have purpose. And in that plea lies both our fragility and our dignity, the refusal to let chaos have the final word, even when silence is all the universe offers in return. The final question. We have wandered through 30 cracks in reality's facade, twin lives mirroring across decades, names defying death, cosmic alignments threading through history like invisible silk. Each story invites a question we cannot fully answer. Are these patterns evidence of a deeper architecture beneath existence? Or are they simply the mind's gentle rebellion against chaos, our refusal to accept that the universe is indifferent to meaning? 3 interpretations linger in the silence. The simulation hypothesis suggests we inhabit a construct where code occasionally glitches, revealing its seams. The fine-tuned universe whispers of cosmic intention, constants calibrated not by chance, but to permit consciousness itself. And apophenia reminds us of our fragility, pattern seeking as evolutionary adaptation, sometimes mistaking noise for signal when trauma demands order. Yet perhaps the deepest truth lies not in choosing an answer, but in honoring the question itself. These synchronicities may not prove design or simulation, they may simply reveal that consciousness and cosmos are not separate. That in becoming aware, the universe began to recognize its own patterns. That our search for meaning is not projection onto emptiness, but resonance with a reality that has always contained the potential for wonder. The final question is not what caused these patterns, but why do we care? In that caring, in the quiet awe that rises when coincidence brushes against significance, we encounter something sacred, the human capacity to find meaning even in uncertainty. Not as delusion, but as participation. Not as proof of design, but as evidence that to be conscious is to seek connection, to weave threads of significance across the void, and in doing so, to transform randomness into relationship. Perhaps the universe is neither designed nor random. Perhaps it is invitational, structured with enough order to permit life, enough mystery to inspire wonder, enough silence to invite our questions. And in asking them, we do not merely observe reality. We complete it.